Hello everyone, it's Wednesday, November 21st, 2012, but you already knew that because you can read. This is part 2 of daily number 523 where we learn to be a better gamer. There's a couple things I want to note before we hop into this second part. If you have been in the StarCraft community for a while, like I'm just going to say around the start of StarCraft 2, you're starting to see the familiar names, the familiar events. A lot of the tournaments were new at one point, but then you have things like NASL that are having their Season 4 finals in, 2-3 weeks? I mean, they've become really established. Everything's on Season 4, 5, 6, something like that. But you can never discredit the idea that there's new folks stepping in all the time. In fact, even though each tournament has individually smaller views, the total combined views of StarCraft continues to grow. So I don't think I say what I'm going to say often enough. Welcome to anyone who's new, who's checking it out. So thrilled to have you here, playing some StarCraft with us, appreciating the sauciness that is this Russian dream man. I'm in a great mood today, by the way. So yes, welcome. It's great to have you. Yeah. I had a second thing, but I don't remember it at all. Whatever. In part 1, we heard me talk a little bit about why, at one point, I despised talking about the PvZ matchup. Everyone was doing something around the 10-minute mark as Protoss and nothing with much deviation before then. But we see TitaN opening with what would be called an old-school build, a fast 4-gate with a fast +1 attack. However, he builds Stalkers. He can retreat the Stalkers. He can force more units out of his opponent. And he's now following it up with this warpprism play. And we saw some ideas of economic forcing by limiting the ZerG's gas flow, i.e. making him build them roaches. He has a delayed layer. But now I want to step in and look at some tactics. I'm almost forced to check out TitaN's cam directly because there's no way in hell anyone's going to be able to make out blue blips on a minimap like that. So I figure I'll just do this and you can see the big blobs of vision. In terms of a versatile and aggressive force, Sentry, Blink Stalker, Immortal. Very, very solid unit composition. Just like this. And so what I wanted to note is some locations that would be very good for us to expand to, some locations that would be good for us to be aggressive along, and just to start to think about those. For one, this peak over here, as well as this peak over here, are excellent warp-in locations because we can bounce from here to the watchtower where we have vision, up to this one, and back over to there. And so long as we control both of these watchtowers, he will have a very difficult time seeing this warp prism, which means we can identify where his army is with these units and drop wherever is weakest. Moreover, I will note that in general on this map, a warp prism trailing along here, along this backside, is also an excellent tool to exploit a ZerG player. He will have an easier time spotting it, but it's very fast and very safe. I still prefer to have the warp prism on my side of things. Also interesting to note, this Twilight Council that's giving us Blink and +2 is ordinarily used because people will generally just, Stalkers with Blink are better than Stalkers without Blink. Duh! Right? There's not much else there. However, notice this thin area here and here and here and here. We don't need Stalkers to hold these areas. We just need 2 force fields and some units. So this means that if we split the Stalkers away from our army, as long as we've fallen back to a slit here, and in fact this is the prime one, just because it's the one closest to our base, we can split our Stalkers away and send these units to this location here to defend themselves, and then we can incorporate Blink up into this warp prism. For expansions, this is looking reasonable. It's still kind of out there. This is looking reasonable. It's very far away from the ZerG base, meaning that this expansion works better with a warp prism because the farther away the ZerG is, killing off this base, the more difficult it is for him to deal with the warp prism. I.e., if he has a bunch of units here and there's a drop in his main, he's in bad shape. Whereas this does not work as well with a warp prism because the ZerG can both attack it and bounce back to defend somewhat easily, but it's better with this set of units. So, yeah. Zooming on up, zooming on up. Sending these locations, and I like pylons here, like nearby these ridges, because again, they're very easy to defend. So here's TitaN exploiting this little thing. Interesting little tactic. Without having an observer or any forward poking thing, he can still check what's going on out this way. So another very simple tactical move right here. 4 units in the main base, everything moves up. This was one of the simpler, less interesting tactical moves, but still note that it does allow us to start to position ourselves here if we so desire that. But I think that that was one of the weaker examples of that, and I'm sort of glad we got to see that because, you know, it's pretty simple. Just send guys up here if you think he doesn't have units, but we want to be a little bit more sexy than that. So here is TitaN getting ready to move up. I realized I forgot one thing to note. Remember when I was pausing and talking about, yeah, here's a good attack angle, here's a good attack angle, here's a good defense angle, here's about these expansions. The one thing I didn't note is where are we most vulnerable? Right here. This is the most vulnerable location, is right here and right here, where we're vulnerable to being surrounded on multiple angles. We cannot hold. And the reason I bring that up is we're going to see how ridiculously carefully TitaN approaches these areas. This is quite nice, so I will throw it down to normal speed. This is, again, one of the reasons why this build is difficult, why this build is technical. We see this, and immediately part of us goes, well, shit. But the other part of you says, ah, now this warp prism has potential to do more damage up here. So TitaN does, I think, a very smart play. He just force fields and retreats as fast as possible. A little unfortunate that his sentries could have all been killed off, but not as big a deal. But we're seeing TitaN do these little pokes and prods, try to find some ground, try to make some headway. It seems like nothing was going on, and in the process of watching this game, I was kind of like, yeah. Okay, again, TitaN, you're probably going to be dead. Happy to engage. This is quite a good angle for us because the shrubbery and the watchtower works on our favor. But this is the part where I was sitting behind him and I actually had this sort of like, oh, he's dead. He's totally screwed. It's done. No way for him to come out of this one. But I want to emphasize the error in my thinking here. Yeah, I know I pause a lot in games, but this, I think, is probably the greatest in-game pause I've, like, ever done. I'd like to just take a special moment to congratulate myself on pausing right here. Nailed it. I like this moment because this is where I think, TitaN, you are totally boned, right? Things aren't going well. However, I want you to note, looking at Curious's bases, he still has not gotten himself an evolution chamber in +1. And if he did, this infestation pit would be a little bit delayed. The gas geysers aren't particularly mind-blowing with their intake, just due to this constant harassment, and more importantly, this constant pressure at the front. I mean, hell, imagine if Curious did have 3 guys in each of these geysers the whole time. He would just have a huge bank of minerals, and, excuse me, a huge bank of gas and less minerals, but he'd still be in effectively the identical position. But what does TitaN have? TitaN has Blink and 2-1 upgrades, and even has the ability to start +3. He has, he has most of his core tech completed for aggression. Curious doesn't have most of his core tech completed for defense. That would be a lot of spines and infestors. And spines are a late game unit for ZerG, just due to the fact that you need a lot of drones to build an appropriate number of spines. So great. In other words, TitaN is by no means dead and is going to prove it with a whole bunch of stunning awesomeness bits. Here we have another nice warp and angle. It's defended by the fact that we have vision of it. We have this watchtower, so there's no way this overlord could have seen. Whoopsie daisies, go ahead and resume. A pretty significant warping. And this is nicely timed, this attack. This isn't just go. This is timed because we see the ZerG army starting to encroach in. We've spotted it, so now we know that this attack tactic will work. And here's what made me just totally have the nerd fist pumps. Notice all these zealots targeted back on these mining drones. Here it comes. Here it comes. And, oh yeah. The whole army is now force fielded up on this top side. And because we have a faster army, because we have this warp prism, we could even have loaded in sentries into the warp prism to make this a little bit easier to pull off. But now we see TitaN making this huge play. And I want to note something right away. It's easy to call this lucky. It's easy to go, well, I mean, if Curious hadn't done that, then he would be in good shape. But I want you to imagine for a moment a Warp Prism play in here, and all of a sudden, 12 Blink Stalkers pop up into the main base and start going to town here. And then you bring your whole army up, the Blink Stalkers pop down, and then they force field this entrance. There's a whole variety of ways to pull this off. Not just with a simple Zealot Warp in. TitaN actually had the adrenaline flow a little too heavy here because he was force fielding about every 7 to 8 seconds instead of every 15 seconds, but, you know, that's to be expected. And of course, as awareness would have it, we almost always want to make sure we know that we killed off a lot of drones in those engagements. So yet again, I was thinking to myself, oh my gosh, TitaN is dead here. He's not going to be able to pull this off. He's going to run out of force field energy. Alack, alas, etc., 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 and hell. TitaN actually, in all honesty, if he wants to do this aggressive warp prism stuff, he really needs it like 7 gateways, maybe even 8. I mean, his money's really, really high. So there's 2 things I'll note. If your money's high and you're still in a good position, it means that you can be in an even better position just by macroing better. Cool. So we see this great play, but look at this. Look at the niceness of having Blink and Warp Prism. TitaN is going to build himself a lot of Zealots, and always remember that Zealots are a great replacement force field. But the other vulnerable location we noted on the map was this nice back alley place. And one of the reasons TitaN actually is correct in staying so low on expansions is that it makes counterattacks very difficult. And it forces the ZerG to play defensively. Because when this sort of stuff happens, why? Because we just had control over the center vision areas. And now we're in great shape. One important thing to note, Infestors are awful against Zealots. Really, truly awful. Even if they're kind of clumped, you have to spend tons of fungal growths on them. I mean, fungal growth does 30 damage to just basic units, so that's 6 fungals to kill a Zealot. So you end up in some problems. But these Blink Stalkers that were over here the whole time, we do have the great fortune of being able to continue to be aggressive with those. So this huge army that Curious has in the middle, this just opens up a big opportunity for TitaN to begin to apply pressure. And that is the primary reason why TitaN is going to be expanding here first. He can always force his opponent to be on the back foot due to things like this. And he's killed off a total of 43 workers. So again, these little tactics are great. He's wasting tons of Infestor energy. He's basically expending only minerals. Here are there's 8 Infestors out. Here's 7 of them. Look at how low these are. I mean, this is the kind of Protoss play a man falls in love with. And in the meantime, TitaN is still making this gateway-heavy army, still making a lot of sentries because, you know, they're sentries. But he has +3 attack. And I will note that at this point in time, the biggest error that ZerG has done is not get upgrades. It is kind of ridiculous that ZerG has no upgrades at this point in time. ZerG really should have at least, like, an upgrade, at least. Most people will be able to be at maybe 1-1 or 2-0 on the roaches. But no matter what they decide to go for, with their upgrades, they will be behind necessarily on upgrades. So here's the great part about that. In this position, I actually thought to myself, yeah, Curious is frickin' dead. If an attack comes, he just dies. Virtually at any point. But these are +3 stalkers with +1 armor. The Zerglings are not actually going to do that much damage. And in fact, Infestors, the most reasonable transition unit, will also not do that much Infestors with the, or won't do that much damage with the infested Terrans, because for one, he should be low on it thanks to our cunning little warp prism harassment. There it is, found it. But also, just due to the fact that infested Terrans are quite weak against armor. So I want you to note that this should have been, in theory, not that one-sided. I mean, the force fields did not really cut that many roaches to the back. But there's no freaking upgrades for ZerG. He just can't do anything. This was, look at how stupidly one-sided this was. I want this to sink in, because I actually thought for a fact TitaN was going to have trouble holding this off. And I actually thought 100%, like, I think it's back here, when TitaN was at like 120 food, I was like dead certain that he would be in a good bit of trouble. But indeed, no. In fact, in Units Lost tab, it's fairly even. Then after this attack, here it comes. 2K down the toilet. And more to go down the toilet to come. Sweet. So what's cool is that in the mid-game, we had the opportunity to see TitaN staying aggressively positioned here and doing neat tactics with this warp prism to keep his opponent delayed on tech, to harass, to do these sorts of force field tactics and all that stuff. But now that we've hit this third base, everything from TitaN is pulled way back. And now the Warp Prism has strengths in terms of its ability to counterattack. Now, I will note, we can walk up, conquer this tower, then we can warp in 3 sentries here, or 3 sentries here, and we can do things like Force Field to ramp and Blink Stalker kill this off. But TitaN is going to move up, try to engage yet again.
Mineral field depleted.
And we see ourselves in kind of a similar position. We have the ability to do these aggressive warp in plays. See, Zealot's there, and TitaN is poising himself to do the same trick. If he sees a flood of units up here, then he's going to force field, and then go for the main. Same tactic twice in a row. Can't hurt. But also notice that TitaN, and this is probably, I think, the most important tactical lesson from TitaN in this game, this move doesn't need to know that units are coming down here to save it. Because either ZerG sends all his units up here, and then we get to force field to ramp, or this happens. ZerG has all his units positioned up here, and that means that these Zealots are guaranteed to do damage. So no matter what ZerG does, as long as this army is sufficiently large, we do excellent damage. And here is the nothing but Infestor army. TitaN just not quite saturating this base, but doing a good job just staying aggressive, not letting the ZerG pile up energy. And look, it's the same thing! Yeah! Do the force field! Do the force field! And TitaN gets the opportunity to spring up into action again. Now I will notice the most significant concern that you would have as a Protoss player here is that he would be doing a counterattack to your very vulnerable, very precious third base. So I think TitaN is going to do the right thing and hightail it out of there. And you know what? I think that is an ideal spot to pause. In part 1, we got the chance to see a kind of basic opening that lets TitaN stay alive, that puts ZerG behind on tech, but not behind on units. We saw how TitaN set himself up to do some upgrades, and how he got the structure in his base that would poise him for part 2 of this daily. And in part 2, we got the chance to see a lot of tactics go down. We saw the significance of the watchtowers to where we were able to do this harassment, and we learned how the effectiveness of our harassment relates to the positioning of our army, and more importantly, the positioning of his army. To sort of hit him where he's weak notion, or to force his units into awkward spots. And in part 3, we're going to see TitaN sort of wrap this up, and we're going to see what happens to his economy as a result of this early game extended aggression. So, we're going to go on to part 3 right now! Woohoo! Woohoo! Yeah! Oh my god, there's so many hearts in the chat. Huge hearts to you guys.